Hey all, today I am going to build a very simple FM synthesizer in Reaktor. What we're going to end up with today is probably something about on the level of a Sega Genesis FM synthesizer. So it's not going to be terribly sophisticated, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by building an FM operator, which is kind of a combination of an oscillator and an envelope. And once we have that operator, it makes it easy to expand on things and build our synth out. A quick recap. Modulation synthesis is when we're inducing change in a waveform at the audio rate. So previously I've talked about ring modulation, amplitude modulation, and this is going to be frequency modulation. In modulation synthesis, by modulating this carrier frequency at the audio rate, we get sidebands, which are frequencies that appear on either side of that carrier. What's particularly neat about FM synthesis is those sidebands split into their sidebands, and those sidebands split into their sidebands, and so we're able to get very, very complex waveforms from just a couple sine waves. In additive synthesis, if you want to make a complex timbre with 17 different frequencies, you need 17 oscillators. Here in FM synthesis, with doing a little bit of mathematical magic, we can do that with just 2 sine waves. Of course, in the 80s, this was a huge deal, and this gave Yamaha the ability to make cheap synthesizers, including the DX7. And as we build this, you'll really hear that retro sound there. So, as always, well, not always, but as usual, I'm going to delete my inputs. And let's make a new macro. And we're going to call this macro FM op. I used to call it FM operator, but there's a lot of words to type, and then we'll end up with a messy panel. Okay, let's go inside here. Our main building block today is going to be the Sine FM oscillator. This friend here. Okay, let's just start very, very simple. Output. No pitch MIDI in. Gate. By the way, if any of this is new, I'm assuming you know how to put together just a simple oscillator in Reaktor. I'll throw a link above if you want to review that. This gate I will use to trigger an ADSR. Gate to the G, out to the A. Let's just create controls here. For the sake of keeping my panel compact, A, D, S, R. And I just said I wanted to keep my panel compact, but let's make this visible just for the sake of us being able to see what's going on. I'm going to clean up my panel. I'm going to make these knobs small too. Okay, that's looking good. We don't see that envelope yet because it's not wired up. There we go. There's our envelope and our envelope controls there. And if we play this, we should just get some nice sine waves. Okay. What I want to use, what I'm going to avail myself of today, is this F input. Let's just create a control. We're going to delete this in a second, but just to demonstrate what this is doing. Okay. Simply put, this is adding this frequency, whatever I set now this knob to be, to our note pitch. So if it's at 0, unsurprisingly, that's at 0. So now let's do this. I just played the exact same pitches, but now I'm adding 1,750 hertz to each of those. So if I make that lower, still 350 hertz is a lot. Okay, it still doesn't sound like those pitches. Again, back to 0. Whoops, back to 0. Ah, come on, friend, back to 0. There we go. Even if I had 50 hertz to it. Oh, that almost sounded in tune. 150. We can hear that by offsetting that frequency, we're pushing those out of tune. Now, what we want to do, because it's frequency modulation, is we want to modulate this frequency at the audio rate. Just to give an example, I could do an LFO here. I'm just going to make some constants. 6 hertz, right? So my LFO is now going at 6 hertz. That's a good vibrato. But if I just run this in, do you hear that LFO? Because I don't. Because it's going up 1 to -1, right? Because it's an LFO. So that's 1 hertz to -1 hertz. And so when we've done vibrato before, we've done -1 note pitch, right? I mean, I could take this and multiply by, let's do 100 hertz. So now it's going up to 100 hertz down to -100 hertz. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's our LFO. But what we want to do is we want to bring this into the audible range. Just for a simple demonstration, turn this into a sine. So now it's in the audible range. We're going to wire up this one to the A, create a control there. Bink. Okay, let's try that now. Ah, hear those sidebands? So when I have the pitch really low at like 2, so this is a pitch of 2. I don't know what that is in hertz. Maybe if I think of it, I'll cut in a card here. But that's note number, MIDI note number 2. So that we can still hear the vibrato. Let's bring it up. And now we can hear that as a timbre. Okay, well, there's some FM synthesis. In order to make this a more John Chowning style tunable FM synthesis, we're going to tinker with this FM operator a little bit. So again, my idea here is I'm going to make this operator, and then I'm going to be able to duplicate it, and then I'm going to connect operators to modulate each other. So I actually only need one sine wave per oscillator. Most of what I need is here, but I'm just going to add a couple more controls. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add an input here, and that input is going to run to my frequency. So again, call this F. But so now I can't do it yet because I need to do some more math. What I'm going to start doing is running my FM operators together like this. But just running that frequency, and again, we know that what comes out of here is audio. So it's going from 1 to -1. So just like before, I'm going to have to multiply this frequency. What I multiply it by, let's hold on to that for a second. The other thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to modify the note pitch of my different operators in ratio to each other. In order to do that, I'm going to have to convert it into a frequency once. So expon F. This converts my note pitch that I'm getting from playing the keyboard into a frequency. In the end, I'm going to want to turn it back, F back to P, in order to run it in there. So right now I've done nothing. I've converted it into a frequency and then just converted it back, just to show. Working, same thing. Okay, let's put in a multiply. Create control. And let's call this F mult because it's our frequency multiply. Now just to move this over. Okay. When that's at 1, everything's being multiplied by 1. So once again, we should have the exact same thing. Okay, turn that down. Sorry, my terrible keyboard playing. Okay. Now, since all the note pitches are being multiplied by the same number, it's the same ratio, we still hear that do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do, right? Because they're all being altered. The frequencies of all of these are being altered in the same way. That's kind of neat. I'm going to change this now. Again, I'm on that knob. I'm going to function here. I'm going to change the range of it to have a maximum of 8. So just to show that, if I now crank this up to 8, that's what, 7 octaves higher. Might be doing my math wrong there. I'll double check that. And then I never want the minimum to be 0 because if I multiply frequencies by 0, they're 0. So I'm just making some sub audio there. Let's do that as 0.1. Let's change my step size to 0.1. Okay, so it's basically a transpose knob at the moment, but this is going to be more important when we have these operators interacting with each other. So I'm going to be able to set my carrier to be 1, and then I could set one of my modulators to be 2, right? And so I can have harmonic relationships between those. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do is I have to affect the range of this frequency. I'm going to do this in kind of a funny way, but hopefully it'll make sense in a second. So what comes out of here is the frequency of the key being pressed times the multiplier, right? So if I hit note number 60, what that gets converted to, I think it's 262 or something hertz. And then if I multiply it by 2, it's 520, 30 something. And then, I convert that back to the pitch. Since I convert this into a frequency, I know the frequency of the note that I'm playing. Now that gives me a kind of range or a ratio that I can modify things by. So again, -1 to 1 is coming out of here. I could take that and multiply it by the frequency of the note I'm playing. So once again, nothing's running into that F right now, but once I set up another operator to plug in, I can get that -1 to 1 to be negative the frequency I'm playing to the frequency I'm playing, right? So if we have the carrier as the center frequency, the modulation will go up and down around that. One more step is I can multiply that frequency that's coming in by a number 2. Now this is the deviation, the amount that vibrato, if we're calling it that, goes up and down. So again, let's move this over. So let's make this a maximum of 8. So I can go up to 8 times the frequency I'm playing. Again, this is doing a whole bunch of nothing there because nothing is coming in, nothing is modulating here. So in order to show these, I know my explanation of this at the moment is rather insufficient. We've now got our FM operator. So let's Command D and wire 2 together. Before I wire them together though, I'm gonna quickly label them so I can tell them apart. FM operator 1, FM operator 2. 1 is my carrier, 2 is gonna be my modulator. Let's get them off on top of each other. I'm actually even gonna set them up on the panel here. So again, modulator, carrier. Right now, if I play something, we're just gonna get a sine wave because my deviation is 0. Okay, let's check what that means. That means that this frequency modulation that's coming in is multiplied by 0. So ultimately, and again, multiplied by this, ultimately what's gonna come to there is 0. Now, it's gonna get interesting when I turn up this deviation. There we go. We've got some FM synthesis going on. I'm going to set this multiplication back to be 1. And the reason these have envelopes now is I can set these envelopes to be different. And so now those sidebands are going to come in on an envelope. Let's try multiplying by 3. Multiply by 5. My keys are getting stuck on there. So this deviation is going to do nothing because that's the frequency that's coming in here. But what we can do in a second is we can chain up multiple ones of these. Okay, so that all sounds very nice, kind of pretty. But that's because I've been using whole number multiples for this F mult here. What if I did 1.2? Once again, if you are of the same generation as me, this immediately conjures up something on the Sega Genesis. Scorpion saying, "Get over here," or something like that. Okay, let's try some different numbers. Once again, I have my envelope so that those sidebands are going to change over time. I can give this a short attack and decay and a low sustain, and then it's really just going to be those sidebands on the attack. If I crank up the sustain here. Less deviation, less of the sidebands effect. One really important thing is I've kind of got the same sound as an envelope filter here, but I don't have a single filter. This is all being accomplished with just 2 sine waves and some relatively simple math. So you can see how efficient FM synthesis is. I always give the example, okay, if adding a filter to your chip on your video game system costs 50 cents and you ship 3 million units, by not having that filter, you've saved $1.5 million, right? Whoops, that knob doesn't do anything. I could set this deviation knob to have an even greater range. Set it to 12, see how that is. I'm not sure I got much out of doing that to 12. So this F mult on the carrier here is just basically a transposition control, right? I'm even going to do this. Pardon my bad typing there. I'll fix that in a second. Let me just label that the carrier so we can always keep that in mind. All right. But one of the things that makes FM synthesis interesting is we can keep adding more of these operators. I'll throw up a chart of maybe the Yamaha DX7, how the different options to configure operators there. Here, where things are side by side, they're just being added together. So that's additive synthesis, or really just mixing them together. But you can see you have modulators, modulating modulators, modulating modulators. So, well, let's just do it. I'm going to take this FM op2, duplicate it out. Now, if I wanted to do that additive part 2, I could just throw in a mixer once again, or an add module. I just have to be careful about clipping. All right, so here we go. Okay, it's a bit odd there. Let's do a couple things. Let's crank up this deviation. Let's turn our attack and decay there short. Let's set this multiplication to be 2. Let's actually make this one harmonic. So let's make that one 3, right? And let's make this one dissonant, 1.6. So I've got this short attack on the modulation of the modulation. So I have that really, percussive attack. And then this sustains, not super high, but reasonably high. And so then we still get that complex timbre as we sustain. Maybe I can even make this release real fast. And then we should just have, it should go back down to a sine wave as it rings out. When that multiplication is too low, it just sounds like a vibrato, huh? It's too much of it ringing out. When they're all in harmonic ratios to other, you can hear how it sounds much more consonant. And then, of course, we can just keep going. So here you go. You've made something that sounds like a happy little Sega Genesis, and you can reconfigure these. Of course, we can add our usual effects. We can add delays. If you wanted to, you can add a filter there. There's nothing saying you can't have a filter in FM synthesis. The Native Instruments FM8 synth has a filter built in. Oh, I need to dial in some deviation here. That doesn't do anything. Oh, there we go. There's our Sega Genesis electric guitar sound. All right, you get the general idea. Once again, all we have going on here is this Sine FM, and we've just done some math. Note pitch comes in, we convert it into a frequency. We're able to multiply it. Again, for our carrier, that's a transposition knob. Oh, and for all of our other operators too, is a transposition knob. But if we transpose how we're modulating things as we chain these together, we create the different patterns of sidebands. Whole number multiples are going to be consonant. Other ratios are going to introduce some sidebands that are not harmonic. Additionally, we have to move that frequency an amount, right? And that deviation amount. So we take in that frequency that's going from -1 to 1. We multiply it by a sort of multiplier here. We have it going 0 to 8. I think I changed 1 up to 12, right? That one goes up to 12, but the 12 didn't seem to get me very much. And then we take that 1 to 8, and then we multiply it by the frequency of the carrier, the frequency from the note pitch. So as we move up and down the scale, up and down the keyboard, the ratio is going to be based on the frequency of the key we press, and then we modulate the frequency by that amount. By changing the envelopes of these operators to different things, we can make those sidebands change over time. Again, using a time variant controller, but rather than modulating a filter, we can just modulate the amplitude of our modulation oscillators in order to create complex timbres that change over time. Pretty cool. Again, this is a very simple FM sound, but there's nothing saying you can't build out from here. Change the sine waves to triangle waves. Sawtooth waves have FM too. Again, the more harmonics you start with, the more likely it is to turn into mud faster. But experiment and let me know what you come up with.